You finally get that raise you've been waiting for. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20. For the first week, you feel amazing. You think about all the things you can finally afford, all the breathing room you'll have. But then something strange happens. A month goes by, maybe two, and that extra money, it just disappears into your life. You're not living extravagantly. You're not throwing cash around like confetti. But somehow you're back to feeling the exact same financial pressure you felt before. You start thinking, if I could just make a little more, then I'd feel secure. Sound familiar? Here's the wild part. This isn't just you being bad with money. This is your brain doing exactly what it's designed to do, and it's been tricking humans for thousands of years. There's a psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation, and it's the reason why more money never quite feels like enough, no matter how much you make. Let me show you how deep this rabbit hole goes. Imagine your brain has a happiness thermostat, kind of like the one in your house. When something good happens, like getting more money, your emotional temperature rises. You feel great. But here's the thing. Your brain doesn't want you to stay at that elevated level. It wants to return you to baseline, to what feels normal. So it recalibrates. What felt like abundance last month becomes your new normal this month. That fancy coffee you treated yourself to? Now it's just part of your routine. The nicer apartments? Well, you've gotten used to the extra space. Your brain has turned luxury into expectation, and suddenly you're right back where you started emotionally, even though your bank account tells a different story. Psychologists have been studying this for decades. There was a famous study back in the 70s that looked at lottery winners and people who had become paraplegic in accidents. You'd think these two groups would be at opposite ends of the happiness spectrum forever, right? But researchers found something shocking. Within a year, both groups returned to approximately their baseline level of happiness. The lottery winners weren't as ecstatic as you'd expect, and the accident survivors weren't as devastated as you would assume. The human brain is astonishingly good at adapting to new circumstances, whether they're wonderful or terrible. It's a survival mechanism that kept our ancestors alive, but in the modern world, it can feel like a curse. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Your brain doesn't evaluate money in absolute terms. It evaluates it relative to what you had before and what other people around you have. This is called social comparison theory, and it's running in the background of your mind constantly, whether you realize it or not. You might make twice as much as you did 5 years ago, but if your friends are making 3 times as much, your brain registers that as falling behind. You're literally measuring your worth and your security against the moving target that keeps shifting every time you look at it. Think about it this way. Someone making $50,000 a year and someone making $500,000 a year both worry about money. The numbers are different, the specifics are different, but the feeling is often identical. The person making $50,000 worries about paying rent and affording groceries. The person making $500,000 worries about private school tuition and whether they can afford a second home. The goalpost just moves. Your expenses expand to meet your income, a phenomenon economists call lifestyle inflation, and suddenly you're trapped on what feels like a treadmill. You're running faster, but you're not actually getting anywhere. And there's a deeper layer to this. Money is tangled up in our sense of identity and security in ways that are hard to untangle. When you grew up, your family had a certain relationship with money. Maybe there was never enough and you learned that the world is scarce and threatening. Maybe there was plenty, but it was used as control or withdrawn as punishment. Whatever your early experiences were, they created neural pathways in your brain about what money means. For some people, money equals safety. For others, it equals freedom, or power, or love, or worth. So when you're chasing more money, you're not really chasing dollars. You're chasing the feeling you think those dollars will give you. You're chasing the sense that you're finally enough, that you're finally safe, that you finally made it. But here's the cruel trick. If you don't feel enough now, more money won't fix that. Because the problem isn't actually the money. It's the story you're telling yourself about what the money means. There's also something called the focusing illusion at play here. When you imagine having more money, your brain focuses intently on all the positive things that would change. You picture the relief, the freedom, the possibilities. But your brain conveniently ignores all the things that would stay exactly the same. You'd still have the same insecurities, the same relationship patterns, the same tendency to worry. Daniel Kahneman, the psychologist who won a Nobel Prize for his work on decision-making, put it perfectly. Nothing in life is as important as you think it is while you're thinking about it. When you're focused on getting more money, your brain magnifies its importance and convinces you it's the key to everything. But once you have it, all the other parts of your life come back into focus, and you realize the money didn't transform you the way you thought it would. So, what's the way out of this? How do you escape the trap of never enough? Well, the first step is just recognizing that this is how your brain works. You're not broken, you're not greedy, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just human, and your brain is following ancient programming that served your ancestors well, but doesn't quite fit the modern world. When you understand that hedonic adaptation is happening, you can start to work with it instead of against it. The research suggests that one of the most powerful things you can do is shift your focus from acquisition to appreciation. Your brain adapts to what you have, right? So the antidote is to intentionally disrupt that adaptation by practicing gratitude. And I know that sounds like self-help nonsense, but the science backs it up. When you actively notice and appreciate what you already have, you're essentially hacking your brain's adaptation mechanism. You're reminding yourself that what feels ordinary is actually extraordinary, that the running water in your home, the food in your fridge, the people in your life, these aren't givens, they're privileges that billions of people throughout history would have considered miraculous. Another powerful shift is to spend money on experiences rather than things. Things trigger adaptation quickly. You get used to your new car, your new phone, your new clothes, but experiences create memories, and memories don't adapt the same way. That trip you took 5 years ago, you probably still think about it fondly. Those concert tickets, that cooking class, that weekend with friends, those moments accumulate in your mind as richness, as proof that your life is full. And interestingly, experiences often bring you closer to other people, which is one of the strongest predictors of long-term happiness. There's also something to be said for defining enough for yourself, not based on what society tells you, not based on what your peers have, but based on what actually matters to you. What does a good life look like to you specifically? Not in the abstract, but concretely. What do you need to feel safe, to feel free, to feel purposeful? When you have a clear answer to that question, you can stop chasing an ever-moving target and start building towards something real. The truth is, more money can solve certain problems. It can relieve immediate financial stress, it can provide security, it can open doors, but it can't fill the hole that comes from not feeling enough, from constantly comparing yourself to others, from believing that your worth is tied to your net worth. That work is internal, and no amount of money can do it for you. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, if I just had a little more, then I'd be happy, pause for a second. Ask yourself what you're really looking for. Is it security, freedom, validation? And then ask yourself if there's a way to cultivate that feeling right now with what you already have. Because the secret that no one wants to hear but everyone needs to know is this: you already have enough. Not because your life is perfect or because you have everything you want, but because the feeling of enough doesn't come from what you have. It comes from how you see what you have. And maybe that's the real shift. Not making more money, but making peace with yourself. Not acquiring more, but appreciating more. Not chasing the next thing, but being present for this thing. That's where the richness is. That's where enough lives. And that's something no paycheck can ever give you. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you experienced this cycle? What helps you feel grateful for what you have? And if you want to keep exploring the psychology behind why we do what we do, subscribe and join me for the next one. Thanks for watching.